Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. Purdue basketball turned in an excellent second week of the season, earning a top 10 road win and handling a good mid-major in Akron. We'll dive into the strong second week as Purdue returned to number one in the AP poll, talk about what we learned about the Boilermakers at full strength. On the flip side, it was a bad night for Purdue football, getting blown out at Washington, losing its 9th straight game, and really raising more questions, more concerns about where all of this is headed as the 2025 season gets ready to come to an end. Lots of thoughts, lots of observations to come. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, on X, whatever you call it, at Boilers Beyond. Lots to talk about here. It's going to be a busy end here to the 2025 calendar year. Be sure you are following along there for all of the commentary, all of the discourse over on the Twitter sphere. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be here every week this season throughout Purdue basketball and beyond. You won't want to miss it. And if you enjoy the show, give us a 5-star review. Tell a Purdue friend of yours. Always looking to grow the show a little bit. I appreciate all of you tuned in. A great week for Purdue basketball. Purdue 87, Alabama 80, Purdue 97, Akron 79. If you were worried after the first week of the season when Purdue beat Evansville by 30 thereabouts and beat Oakland by 10, you should be feeling a lot better this week. Purdue is back to number one in the AP poll. If you are real into that, I can't stress enough, that really doesn't mean a whole lot. The AP poll is not particularly important, especially so in basketball. However, it is always nice to take the court with number one next to your name. It's a good little status thing. Purdue is there once again after spending a week at number two. But this week was everything you could have hoped for. Purdue got what might be the best win of any team in the nation to this point through 2 weeks by a true road environment at a top 10 team in Alabama, going in there, getting that win, controlling the game pretty nicely. Alabama only led that game for 7 minutes and 11 seconds. Purdue led for more than 24 minutes of that game. Really back and forth. A really fun game that was. That's not an easy place to play. Kind of an old school shoebox type of gym down there. And Alabama plays a style that can just get sideways on you. And you saw Alabama make 10 threes in the first half, yet Purdue still took a lead into the break. And just a really, really tremendous win for Purdue, and we'll talk more, about individual performances and takeaways, but that was just an awesome win. That's one that's going to age well. That'll be a quad 1A win. It's the type of win that, on your Selection Sunday graphic that CBS puts up that kind of stands out on the column of big wins. A really great performance for Purdue. And then it came back home and got a comfortable win against a good Akron team. These games are always tricky. Purdue is really unique in this manner. Purdue is willing to schedule games like this when a lot of programs are not. I looked at Akron's schedule. And for those unfamiliar, Akron won the MAC last year. I believe it was a 13 seed in the NCAA tournament. And it got blown out by Arizona, but it returned a lot. It returned a lot from last year's team. And it went out and got the Mahaffey kid from Ohio State in the portal. That's a really good mid-major team. Purdue is the only high-major opponent on Akron's schedule. Do you think that's by design? Because John Gross doesn't want to play good competition? I'm going to doubt it. But as you look at this is reflective of the challenge for mid-majors, scheduling quality, really scheduling any power conference opponents in the non-conference is virtually impossible. But Purdue doesn't back down from that. Purdue's played Yale a program under James Jones that's really good. Purdue played Toledo a couple years ago when Toledo was tough. Purdue has played some of these good mid-majors. It hasn't been afraid. That was a nice win. That was a nice professional manner to go about that game. Akron got off to a hot start, but Purdue really clamped down that thing and pulled away nicely, and that game was never in doubt in the second half. I think the story of the week was Trey Kaufman-Renn returning to the floor, because in week one, Purdue was not playing at full strength. Purdue didn't have Trey Kaufman-Renn out there, and at times Purdue didn't look great. But you were reminded of how good Trey Kaufman-Renn is, how impactful he is on the game, and really how impactful he was on both ends of the floor. Purdue struggled mightily in that opening week to rebound the basketball. Purdue was a -2 in rebounding margin through 2 games. That's not good against a couple of overmatched opponents. But you saw that story completely flip this week. You saw Purdue just dominate on the glass. The win at Alabama, Purdue's domination on the glass was a massive part of the story, as Purdue goes in there and out-rebounds Alabama 52-28. And then against Akron gets some rebounds early on in the game and is looking like it's hanging around there. Purdue ultimately out-rebounds Akron 45-26. At one point, Akron went like 10 minutes without a rebound. He is rebounding like a madman. 15 rebounds in each of the 2 games. He's rebounding with an intensity of Caleb Swanigan and Travion Williams. And I bring those two because there were a couple times against Akron where he is visibly stealing rebounds from his opponents. And that's something that I don't know that we've really seen from a Purdue big man recently besides those two. A couple of the better rebounders Purdue's had in recent memory, those guys, they weren't wanting to share rebounds. They wanted it all for themselves. And that's what he's doing right now. And it's transformed Purdue to have him at the 4 rebounding compared to the 5 spot last year, because he really had to fight last year. He was not the bigger guy in the matchup at the 5 spot virtually any time last year. Certainly against credible competition, he was not. Whereas in this spot, he is bigger than pretty much anyone you're going to put at the 4 next to him. And with Oscar Cluff, who's rebounding really well himself, that's a massive presence that Purdue has on the interior. When those two are on the floor, I don't have the numbers of just when those two are on the floor together, but observationally, those guys are just dominating. They are erasing anything for the opposition's second chance, and it's been really, really impressive. Kaufman-Renn is an All-American, man. He is an All-American. He had 6 assists this week, 5 of them against Alabama, and he brought that element of big-to-big passing in that Alabama game, something that is hard to do. It's not easy to do. Those guys typically aren't supernatural passers, but he's pretty good at it. And you saw him flipping it up to Daniel Jacobson for a couple of lobs. I think he kicked out for an open 3 at one point. He's looking good. He's looking good with the basketball in his hands. I believe he just had 1 or 2 turnovers this week. He was magnificent. Just magnificent. And Oscar Cluff had a few assists too. That's a new element that Purdue has to this offense because it is playing bigger. It's something Purdue needs to do when it's playing bigger, but it's been great through 2 games. Will opponents develop counters? Sure, but for where Purdue is right now, it's just very clear. Purdue is a completely different team with him versus without him, and it feels very obvious to say now, and it was certainly noteworthy at the time, but just a great week for him, and you see how different Purdue is because Jack Benter played 6 minutes at Alabama. He played 13 minutes against Akron. that is more in line with what you will see. Liam Murphy did not play in the game on Sunday against Akron. He was dealing with a shoulder thing. We'll see what it looks like for him. But he didn't play. Coach's decision in the Alabama game. There's not minutes there. Trey Kaufman-Renn's going to eat up so many minutes there because Purdue is so good with him on the floor that it's just, that's something that Purdue's going to do this year. And with Oscar Cluff, he was magnificent. This is the role Purdue got him to play. He is not going to wow you athletically. He's not going to be a rim runner up and down the floor. He's not going to be putting post moves on you like he's he's a real gifted post scorer, almost like, Jawan Johnson turned into or something like that. But what he's doing is exactly what Purdue needs him to do. 11.5 points per game on 67% from the floor. He's made 10 out of 13 free throws. He's grabbing 11 rebounds a game, 8 assists, just 1 turnover through 4 games. That is precisely what you got him for. He's rebounding. He's getting cheap buckets. He's not out there making a ton of big-time moves. And he's made a few post moves and scored on a couple of post-ups. But in large part, these are just baskets that are there for him. And that's really what Purdue needed. Someone to finish well around the rim, someone to get rebounds. This offense is so good that if you're getting second chances, you're probably going to score. I don't know what the points per possession on the season is right now, but man, in all of these games, it's been really good. Purdue's offense has been great. Cluff has been exactly what the doctor ordered for Purdue, and it's a great example of Purdue finding what it needed out of the portal. We don't need to spend a ton of time on Braden Smith. He's the best player in America. The way he took over that Alabama game was special. That's what he does. His uncanny ability to get defenders in the air and get fouled and go to the free throw line, that came up huge for Purdue in that game. Rafael Davis was talking about it on the Big Ten Network broadcast on Sunday, and he's just so good at it. Time and time again, teams know it's coming. They talked about how Akron knew it was coming, and he still gets to the line 2 or 3 times on that. Down the stretch, he was excellent against Alabama. Just surgical. A great performance, and on Sunday he was great again. We can't spend every week talking about how great Braden Smith is because it's very repetitive, it's very monotonous, but that's the best player in the country. He's not the best NBA prospect in the country, but he is the best college basketball player in America right now. And it really helps him that Omer Mayer is looking really promising to this point. He had a great stretch in the first half when Braden Smith was on the bench at Alabama. I think it was 7 points in the first half. He really came in and gave Purdue a jolt of offense, and that's what he's capable of. He's capable of coming in and picking up where Braden Smith left off. He's not completely there yet as a ball handler and passer, but man, if you're looking at the point guards Purdue's had in recent years, he's right up there. He's really fun to watch. He can score the basketball. His mid-range game is pretty nice. He can obviously handle the ball. He can pass it. He sees the floor well. There have been a few turnovers that you'd like to clean up a little bit. That's going to be a really big thing for Purdue this year. So far, so good on the turnover front. Purdue's turnover percentage is one of the nation's best right now, just under 13% of its possessions. That's really good, but you've got to keep that up because, we'll quote Matt Painter here, you can't rebound a turnover. And with how efficient Purdue's offense has been and how well Purdue's getting on the offensive glass, it's better to take a bad shot than to turn it over. you've got to give yourself a chance. And that's when you give the opponent's life, when they have runouts, when they get easy layups, when they get transition threes. That's how teams keep their head above water. And if you're Purdue, you have to keep them at bay. You have to keep them below water. Any cliche you want. You have to be able to come out and really dominate your opponents. And those turnovers haven't been a problem yet, but it's that banana peel that's on the track in Mario Kart that you've just got to watch out for, because you're in a world of hurt if you run into it. That's what can get up and slow down Purdue's offense, because aside from that, this has been an unbelievably efficient, unbelievably effective offense through 4 games. It's not a great defensive team yet. I think there's room for improvement. Purdue's got to do a bit better of a job in dribble containment. I don't know if that involves sagging off the ball handler more. You don't want to get torched from 3, but you can't live in help. That's really been a problem for Purdue early on. However, I do wonder, when you look at these stretches for Purdue's opponents when they score, boy, just anecdotally, it feels like that Cluff and Kaufman-Renn combination on there. And certainly Jacobson as well with some of what he brings. But that Cluff and Kaufman-Renn combination just feels like it rebounds so well that it's really, really helped Purdue defensively there, holding opponents to 1 shot. So Purdue comes up now, back to number 1 in the country. It's MTE time. Purdue goes down to Baja Mar in the Bahamas for, I don't know what this tournament's called. We'll find out. I don't know what this tournament's called. I don't see it right away on my Scores app here. Yeah, I don't know. Some tournament down in the Bahamas. They always have a name. But Purdue gets Memphis Thursday, 6:00 p.m., bit of an early start. If you're on the Eastern time zone, a really early start if you're on a different time zone. And then Friday, it's either Wake Forest or Texas Tech. You could either get a really big-time game there with Texas Tech, or you get a matchup with Miles Colvin, if you want a little storyline there. Memphis is not particularly good. It just lost on Sunday pretty handily at home to a UNLV team that's already lost 2 bye games to UT Martin and to Montana. It is Memphis under Penny Hardaway. There's talent. They're always dangerous. They're capable of beating you on any given night, really, but they're also capable of just imploding in really, really poor fashion. It's an interestingly constructed lineup. You'll see Doug McDaniel, the old Michigan guard. He's the point guard there. Sincere Parker. I was looking through the roster and I just made note of this. Sincere Parker's name sounded familiar. He was at McNeese in the NCAA tournament game. He's there. Aaron Bradshaw was at Ohio State. Big guy, 7-footer. Look, you don't know what you're going to get. Memphis could come out and play really well. And if Purdue doesn't play well and that happens, then you're in for a real game, because there's ability there. There's athleticism. Memphis has talent. But at the same time, if Purdue comes out and plays well, there's also the possibility that Purdue just runs Memphis off the floor. And of course, if you're a Purdue fan, that's what you want to see. Now, how do you factor in the ballroom? I'm assuming this is being played in a ballroom there at a casino in the Bahamas. I don't know. You see weird stuff in these MTEs. These aren't basketball environments. Again, kind of a test of the professionalism here, because weird things happen in these MTEs every year. Like last year, UConn went out to Maui, and did it lose all 3? I can't remember. But you see some of these teams that are good struggle in MTEs, and you see these teams that aren't very good go dominate an MTE. A test of your professionalism here. Can Purdue come out and just dominate this MTE? If you get that second game against Texas Tech, that's a really big deal. That's a big game to get. If you're Purdue, you're really looking to stack as good of an NCAA tournament resume as you can. And Texas Tech is another big-time one. Texas Tech's 16th at Ken Pom right now. Wake Forest is 52nd. So it's not like Wake Forest would be bad. You'd be a fringe quad one game there. But you want to play the best if you're Purdue. You want to get JT Toppin, a fellow National Player of the Year candidate. That's what you want to see. That's what you want to see. Good opportunities, though. And I was listening to Rothstein earlier. He brings up a good point. You know, you look ahead to Purdue here in the non-conference, and none of these games look too terrifying. You know, you get Iowa State at home. You get Marquette at home. Marquette doesn't look very good. Iowa State's going to be tough, but it's Purdue at Mackey Arena. I think you feel good about that. Auburn in Indianapolis. Auburn took Houston to the wire, but again, I think you feel all right in front of a semi-home crowd against an Auburn team that hasn't been great so far. Your early Big Ten games are Rutgers and Minnesota. I mean, Rutgers looks bad. You've got to survive that game that's been a landmine on your schedule, but you get through this and you do start to think about hitting the new year with a 0 in the loss column, and you go to Wisconsin to start the new year. That'd be a big one for Purdue there. But I wanted to touch really briefly. We're going to be a long episode here. Basketball signing day was last week. It's a credit to Purdue and also a reflection of where we are at in the sport, that signing days really feel like a non-event now. I can't tell you the last guy, especially in basketball, that made his decision on signing day or anything. Purdue signs 4. A real reflection on how Purdue is kind of approaching this era of the game a little bit differently. I don't know how many teams took a 4-man high school recruiting class on signing day last week. I can't imagine it's many. Purdue is embracing a little bit different of a approach to roster construction here. It's worked for Purdue. Purdue's not going to mess with it. You get Luke Ertl. He's a heck of a competitor, very skilled at the lead guard spot. Jacob Weber is a lights-out shooter, as good as you're going to find at the high school level. I can't claim to know a ton about Rivers Knight, but if you take these guys that feel like they came out of nowhere, feel like they were a little under-recruited, Matt Painter has a pretty good track record on those guys, and you get Sinan Juan, the 7-footer. You continue that legacy. He's a real rim protector. The shot blocking numbers in the FIBA event or whatever it was last year were remarkable. He can rim run a little bit. I think there's still some development on the offensive side for him, but look, it's going to be a very different looking Purdue team next year when you lose 4 starters, but Purdue's backfilling it with a pretty well-rounded class with 3 really highly regarded guys. By all accounts here, a really good group for Purdue, and we'll see what Purdue does in the transfer portal to round out next year's roster. I did want to close the basketball segment. I had a question about Matt Painter. He got his 500th win on Sunday overall, including his Southern Illinois time against Akron. And just the question was how many wins he ends his career with. I don't know. He's done this all. I guess I'll give him some flowers here because he's built this during a really tumultuous time in college basketball. When Purdue was building this thing in the mid-20 teens, getting into the late 20 teens, that was the height of the FBI scandal into college basketball when obviously teams were cheating their you-know-whats off, but that was some of Purdue's competition, right? I mean, whether it was named or not, there were some real competitors of Purdue that were not playing by the same rule book that Purdue was, and you can argue the merits of that, but it didn't stop Matt Painter from assembling something really impressive. And then the COVID year comes in, the transfer portal comes in, NIL comes in. I mean, man, it's not like it was that long ago, to me at least, that Matt Painter goes on the Dan Dockett show and speaks his mind about Matt Harms and No Gel Eastern, more specifically, transferring during COVID. That should have been a negative, right? When you build a program the way Purdue has, that should have been a negative, but it hasn't been. Purdue actually got to a higher level during all of that time, despite not having some top-of-the-line payroll, despite not living in the transfer portal. Purdue's taken a few transfers, right? David Jenkins, Lance Jones, Oscar Cluff, Liam Murphy. Go back a little bit further when it was the grad transfer era. You had Jihad Proctor, you had Evan Boudreaux, Sterling Carter, Spike Albrecht. But this hasn't been a program that's been defined by transfers at all. I don't know what the win-loss records over the past decades say, but there certainly aren't many coaches operating their programs at a higher level than Matt Painter. Purdue did the virtually impossible by replacing a Hall of Fame coach with a better coach. But that's exactly what Purdue's done. I have no idea how many wins Matt Painter will finish with. I don't see him doing this forever. He's 55 now. I don't see him being the type of guy that wants to coach until he's 70. He just doesn't strike me as that type of guy. Say he does this another 10 years at an average of 25 wins per year. Well, you're at 750. And based off the current numbers, that would put you in the top 25. There are some guys that'll get to that point that are ahead of him on the active board. Does he do it 10 more years? I don't know. I really don't. But I think you're going to see, as he winds down here, the wins per year in the latter 10 to 15 years of his career is going to be a really impressive number. We're in the final stretch of 2025 as Thanksgiving and Christmas are just around the corner. We are all checking items off of our lists. Did you review your insurance program this year? If not, the time is now. As an Indiana Farm Bureau insurance agent, I'm here to make sure your insurance program is exactly where you need it to be. Give me a call at 317-846-5861 or email me at jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com. Let's make sure you're all set for 2026. Things weren't so great on the football side of things for Purdue this weekend. Washington 49, Purdue 13. For the second time this season, Purdue looked wholly unprepared for a game on the road against a team wearing purple, if you want to get more specific there. First, it was a 19-0 shutout loss at Northwestern. The tone was set right away in that game. Purdue looked lifeless. Purdue had responded well from that, competed well against Rutgers, competed well against Michigan. Ohio State was what it was. And then Purdue came out and just laid an egg in this game. Just a really poor performance. Purdue had opportunities early to make this interesting. On Washington's first drive, a snap goes awry. Breon Ishmael recovers the fumble. Purdue's in Washington territory as it starts its possession. The drive goes nowhere. I think Purdue had -1 yards. Then the next two drives both get across the 50. Not a ton doing, but Purdue gets across the 50. No points. And at that point, the floodgates just started to open, right? It just got out of hand way too quickly. Purdue, that's right, back-to-back turnovers on downs, and then Ryan Brown throws a bad pick. And at that point, it's just starting to unravel. As you go to the locker room, it's 28-0, and this game's over. And it felt like it just unraveled so quickly for Purdue. There's not an excuse in this. I don't like saying things like this because it comes off as an excuse, and it's not an excuse. It's a reason why something might have happened isn't always an excuse. The schedule did Purdue no favors here, sending it out west to Seattle for Purdue's 7th game in as many weeks. After back-to-back games against Michigan and Ohio State, a couple of really physical opponents. You can go back to when this schedule was released. This was one of the first things I saw. It is just a bad spot here. But that's part of the Big Ten in this era. You've got these West Coast teams. You're getting the money. You got to deal with it. The biggest story from this game, if you ask me, is the quarterback position. Just Purdue started Ryan Brown. It was Malachi Singleton who took the majority of the snaps. Neither quarterback was particularly effective. Until garbage time, Purdue got nothing going for it. 1 for 6 for 17 yards and an interception for Ryan Brown. A much better stat line for Malachi Singleton, but less than 6 yards per attempt. Not great. Not great at all. We spent a lot of time this year talking about the quarterback position and how important it is to Purdue's future. And now 11 games in, you have maybe more questions than you did at the start of the season. I don't know right now that you can feel confident about either of these guys going into next year, because Ryan Brown did some really nice things at the start of the year. There were things you saw and really looked like a first-year starter. I think back to the interceptions against USC. I think back to a bad interception against Southern Illinois, the interception he threw against Notre Dame. But there was real resolve. He kept coming back. He made some nice throws in there. But over time, that's really dwindled, and his performance recently has been really rough. I don't know if that fourth quarter at Minnesota just rattled him. I don't know if that injury he suffered at Northwestern is still really lingering, but there's been some real regression after a promising September. Is there just that much tape on him now that teams have him figured out? I don't know. And with Malachi Singleton, he was fine in this game. It's just clear Purdue doesn't want him pushing the ball downfield much, and I don't know if you can win in a check down offense. I just don't. The quarterback spot is paramount to Barry Odom's success at Purdue. He's got to get that right. There are some really tricky conversations that need to be had here in the next 2 weeks. The unsportsmanlike conduct penalties were a disaster in this game. I don't know what the deal was. It was both sides of this. Washington was super chippy as well, and obviously Washington got away with it. They had 3 unsportsmanlike conducts as well as Purdue. 6 unsportsmanlike conducts in one game is a lot. But you can play into the Ryan Walters factor of this game. Maybe. But most of these guys didn't play for Ryan Walters at Purdue. This roster has 80 new guys. They didn't play for Ryan Walters. And these Washington guys, they didn't play against Ryan Walters at Purdue or Illinois. I don't know. Was there something to it? Yeah. I mean, Purdue fans don't like the guy. And I don't know whether Ryan Walters has any bad blood with Purdue or not. He certainly may. But this was just bizarre. It was bizarre. You have Rico Walker get booted out of the game for 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. You have Miles Slusher taunting Jed Fish, the Washington head coach, as a player that he tackled is injured and ultimately needs to be removed from the field on a stretcher. And I think he was left on an ambulance, as I recall. I mean, what are we doing here? This is a step backward. Year ones are about setting a foundation, and stuff like that is not progress. That's going backwards. 3 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties when you're 2-8 and you've lost 8 games in a row. That can't happen. That's BS. That cannot happen. And it just brings us to the disappointment of where Purdue is with this all. Barring the upset of the year in college football, Purdue is going to finish 2-10. Purdue is going to become just the second Big Ten program in the last 40 years to post consecutive winless seasons in Big Ten play, joining 2018 and 2019 Rutgers. Before that, you go to the late 70s, early 80s when Northwestern had 3 or 4 years in a row without winning a Big Ten game. Barry Odom is going to become just the second Purdue coach to win fewer than 3 games in his debut since 1942. Elmer Berman or something like that. I saw his name, forgot to write it down. He did so in 1942, And then since then, Darrell Hazell really struggled and went 1-11 in his debut season. And Barry Odom is probably going to go 2-10. So, look, we knew this roster was really limited. The Vegas win total was 2.5 or 3.5, depending on which sports book you shopped at. The roster was limited. When you bring in as many portal guys and you're playing as many young guys as Purdue did and Purdue is, you're fighting an uphill battle. The path to piecing all of that together into a strong roster is really narrow. It's hard to pull that off. You've seen Indiana do it, and it's become what everyone points to. That's the exception. That's not the rule. You've seen that rule come to fruition this year because the talent just isn't there. And it shows up in games where Purdue's just really outmatched. But those games where Purdue wasn't totally outmatched, your game at Minnesota, your game against Rutgers, those loom so large. Because if you could have gotten one of them, man, if you could have gotten both of them, this feels different. It shouldn't. You shouldn't evaluate it differently if you're in on the staff, if you're evaluating things. A couple plays shouldn't change the way you evaluate your team. But man, the feeling, the perception is very different if Purdue had picked up a win. But instead, you're looking at 2-10. You're looking at 10 straight losses. You're looking at back-to-back seasons where you don't beat a power conference opponent. The fan sentiment's really rough right now, and you can't blame anybody. We'll get to some Q&A stuff here soon. The fans are upset. The fans are bordering on apathy, and that's dangerous if you're Purdue. You can't have that happen. There's a lot of conversation about Purdue's investment in football. I certainly hear it. I don't know that I disagree with a lot of it, but it's very hard to quantify some of this given the lack of open records related to player compensation. But fans are checked out. This is leading up to a just critical portal cycle. Purdue brings on a new director of player personnel, Butler Benton. He comes in from UCLA. He's got a real nice resume. Spent time with Mark D'Antonio at Michigan State. He crossed paths with Barry Odom at Arkansas. Worked for Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. He's got a nice resume for a pretty young guy. And I'm not going to claim to know the day in, day out of player personnel guys, but this is Purdue going all in on evaluating the transfer portal, on putting together a better roster for next season. It's obvious that Purdue wants to grow this area of its program, its scouting, its identification, moving towards more of an NFL style, not totally to that point, but it seems like a good enough hire. This is leading up to a portal cycle that will make or break Purdue. And after the bucket game, we're going to have a pretty deep dive into the state of the program after year one for Barry Odom. But at this point, all that's left, 2 weeks of practice to evaluate what you have and prepare for that portal window in early January, because you can't do this again next year. You cannot be this bad again. Purdue's an improved team from last year. Yes, it is. You can look at power rating metrics. You can look at it with your eyeballs. This is better than last year was. This isn't close to good enough. And I got a question from a listener that kind of sums it up. He asks if Purdue football is in a death spiral. And he says you only get out of Purdue's current situation with a ton of luck or a ton of money. And he says he doesn't know where the money can come from. Points out that, 2 coaches in a row haven't achieved even mediocre results, though he says give Odom another year. Yeah, things are never as good or bad as they seem, right? I do believe that. I try to... You talk about things you really do believe in life, and that's something I'm pretty strongly in belief of, that this isn't that bad. It's bad. I shouldn't say it's not that bad. This is really bad for Purdue football, but there's a path out of this, right? I remember back in 2016 when Purdue fired Darrell Hazell Purdue had won 9 games in 4 years. The recruiting was terrible. The crowds at Ross-Ade Stadium were non-existent. Things were really bleak, and Purdue got that turned around. This portal cycle is critical because every year you struggle, it just gets harder and harder, right? It gets harder to recruit in high school. You have to overpay more and more in the portal. It's harder to keep your current guys. Guys check out. It's hard. You've got to get this roster better, and that's doable. I'm not going to claim, to know all of the details of the athlete compensation stuff, but you do have the full amount of revenue sharing. Anything on top of that, I don't know, but that's $13 to $15 million to work with. That's a positive. That's a place to start. There are some competitors you're going to have in the Big 12 and the ACC that don't have that. That's a place to start. Now, are there teams in the Big 10 that are going to have more? There always have been. And that's part of how you evaluate this. Expectations are going to be different in the new Big 10. It's very difficult to sustain high levels of success without recruiting at an elite blue chip level. You look atop the Big 10. Yes, Indiana's there. Indiana has hit the jackpot in the portal with a lot of these JMU guys and with hitting on back-to-back quarterbacks in Rourke and Mendoza. And you look at the other teams. You've got Ohio State, maybe the best recruiting program in the country, right there with Georgia and Alabama. Oregon, same deal. Michigan recruits well. Penn State recruits well. If you're not doing that, then you kind of have to hit your bets on the right years when you have that quarterback and you have a roster around him. It's not impossible. It's not impossible for Purdue to get out of this. It's been a miserable 2 or 3 years. It has been, and I get it. I get the frustration. Purdue can get out of this. And then I had a question. What are 3 adjectives you'd use to describe this Purdue team using the example of hard, smart, and tough? Yeah. Barry Odom's mantra hasn't aged particularly well this year. It hasn't come to fruition for Purdue. That's not to say that, he can't be the guy, because he absolutely can. But, boy, not a rough ending. There's no way to sugarcoat losing 10 games in a row to close your season. That's what Purdue's closing in on. And then he also asks about the current state of the locker room with the jawing and the unsportsmanlike conduct. Has Barry Odom lost the locker room? How do you keep the locker room together for the Indiana game? I can't speak to that. Whether a coach has lost the locker room or not is kind of hard to quantify. Purdue did bounce back well from that terrible showing against Northwestern. But now you only have one more game, and you're going to be a major underdog. So you can come back and fight hard, but if you still lose by 3 touchdowns, no one's waving black and gold pom-poms as Purdue leaves the field, losing by 3 touchdowns to Indiana. We'll find out, but what matters for Purdue is that the right guys are bought in, that the right guys are all in for 2026, ready to move forward, ready to attack 2026 and be better. Because it has to be. And you have to have those guys who you want to be part of the solution back and working towards that next year. That's all I've got for today, guys. It's a really interesting time with Purdue basketball in a wonderful spot and Purdue football in probably an equally perilous spot. We'll be back next week. I will put a wrap on whatever goes down in the 2 games down in the Bahamas. We'll talk a little Purdue football. I'm sure there will be some type of news to talk about. I don't know that we'll preview the Oak and Bucket game in any too great of detail, but we'll talk about it. Send over your questions. Do it on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. Email me, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and give us a positive review if you enjoyed the show. Until next week, guys, enjoy a nice week of college basketball. Enjoy that tournament down in the Bahamas. Safe travels to anyone heading down there. Talk to you next week. Take care.